literacy is kind of equal to the power, right? Like I feel like, if I bring it back to history and they try to keep the literacy from people because they know once you start reading and once you start learning, you want to learn and grow more. And you're not just going to be okay with the conditions as you're able to read more, find out more, your mind just craves for more, right? And so if you start having that hunger, that desire, you no longer are content with where you are and who you are. Part of that reading is giving your mind freedom to learn and to grow, giving your mind the opportunity to see the world, right? Like, don't take the picture that's given to you. You get to paint the picture that you read, right? And you get to build that mind muscle. And so I think that's what it is. And then that expands to so many other aspects of your learning, your growth, and your development. So,
ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Literacy Journeys with Linda. I am so excited about my guest today. He is a principal of a middle school. His name is Dr. Tron Young, and I'm going to let him tell all about himself, where he's from, his literacy journey, and his childhood experiences. And you are really in for a treat. So I'm so excited to introduce you to Mr. Tron Young.
Hello there. Hello. How are you?
Okay, and I want to call you Dr. Young, or how do you want to be addressed?
I mean, that's fine. I'm absolutely fine with Dr. Young. That's what my kiddos call me. Here. They were here when I got my journey, right? When I got my doctorate, and so it was really nice for them to see and understand that process. Right. And they kind of celebrated it with me. So that was good when I did that 2 years ago. So I'm excited to be on. I don't know. You just want me to go ahead and tell me a little bit about myself, or how you want me to go?
Please.
All right. Well, so I am currently the middle school principal here in O'Fallon, Illinois, at Joseph Arthur Middle School with Central 104 School District, where every day we're making a big impact in the lives of our students, one moment, one interaction at a time. We're super excited about that. I was born and raised in Centralia, Illinois.
Oh, down the road,
Yeah, so I absolutely love my hometown, home of the Orphans. The Centralia Orphans, our high school mascot. And so my literacy journey as a child, it's kind of crazy. As a kid, I remember having books, and I remember the books that had the gold backing, right? The gold seal on there.
They're called little golden books.
Yes, little golden books. There you go. Those are ones I just remember. I remember a lot of having it. So it's funny when we had a book shower when we had our first kid, just to build that library for him, and got some of those books. So as a kid, I loved reading. I really liked it until about my middle school time. When I got into middle school, it became a chore instead of a thing of enjoyment, right? So they started what called the AR, or accelerated reader.
Oh,
and you had to read so many books and get so many points and had a score. So I wasn't reading for the love and the joy of reading. I was reading to get so many points. And so it really took the joy away from reading for me, I would say, for a while. And so I stopped reading as much as I used to. But I remember loving.
Go back though, because you said I want to, if you don't mind, I want to go back to when you were a child. You said you loved reading. How did that happen? Why?
I think it was just always had a book, right? So it was a requirement for me on Saturdays, right? So we got up Saturday morning, we had to do our chores, and I got to watch some TV. But if I had to watch TV, I had to give 30 minutes for watching TV. So I had to write 30 minutes if I want to watch those Saturday morning cartoons, which they don't do anymore. But to watch those Saturday morning cartoons, I had to commit to having reading, right? So I had to develop their reading. So that was part of it. And I also had to read so many minutes during the week as well. So it was like I had that, but I got to choose what I wanted to read at that time, right? Like I have to pick the book. I got to read for enjoyment, and had a little area in my bedroom where I was sitting out on the floor and kind of enjoy reading.
So if you don't mind, tell me about your family setup. Who's imposing these?
Yeah, no. So it was a village. It definitely was a village. So I was raised in a single parent home. I'm the baby of 3. I have an older brother who's 6 years older than me. Then my sister's 4 years older than I. And then it's me. And to be very honest, right? So my mother, I
Yeah.
will instill those things on the weekends, but she worked in the factory. She worked from 3:30 at night to 5:30 in the morning.
Wow.
So from the time I was little time I can remember. But my grandma and grandpa had 10 kids, 5 boys and 5 girls. And 3 of my aunts lived in my hometown. And so 2 of them really helped raise me.
Okay,
My
really.
Aunt Valerie, especially, I would come home and you can get a snack, and then you were sitting at that kitchen table and you were doing your homework, right?
Mhm.
When you got done, right? And then at least twice a week, you had to have a book. You always had to have a book, and you were going outside playing, or you were reading a book. You just weren't sitting in front of a TV. So that was kind of that. It was kind of a family expectation, right? Like that you were reading, and you had a book, and you were along that journey. So
Why
it
is it?
was,
Why was that a family expectation?
I don't think I've ever stopped and think why it was a family expectation. I would
Mhm.
say it probably was one of those expectations because it definitely was instilled to me that education was a
Yeah.
key, was one thing that nobody could take away. So, right,
Right.
as you build your mind and your power in that, that's one thing that someone cannot take away from you. They
Mhm.
could take away a lot of things, but you growing in your knowledge and you growing
Right.
academically is something they can't take away.
Yeah.
And I understood that reading was part of that, right? Like as a
Right.
young kid, I don't know if I understood it then as much as
Sure.
I understand it now,
Right.
that how I did. But as I look back and I'm like, man, like they always make sure like there was a book, like there was something that I had a library card. We would go up to the library on the weekend and we get to choose
Oh,
our own book, right? Like it was
nice.
fun to go through and we got to select a book that we wanted to get from the library. Like that was fun to me, you know. So they made the journey of literacy and having a book in your hand and reading something that was fun, right? Like something that was like it was just kind of expected, right? Like, oh, you don't have anything to do, well, go read a book, right? Like you can go read a book, you don't have anything to do.
So Dr. Young, you're saying though, but some kind of transition, a pivot occurs when you get into middle school. You got the
Yes.
AR system, and I think a lot of young people are like that. Boys especially, they don't care for reading that much anymore when they get 12, 13.
Right, right. And right, because it becomes non-interest, it becomes something that they think is not useful. Actually, I was in a class just the other day and they were talking about things that you don't need in what classes, like they were having a
Mhm.
journal prompt or whatever. And just a kid was like, I don't know why we have to continue to read, like we already know how to read. And just hearing other kids, right, like defending that, like, yes, but you continue to read because you continue to build your imagination, continue to build your vocabulary, you continue to do some of those things. In literacy is a lifelong journey.
Wait a minute, you're
But
saying the kids were defending this?
yes, yes. So it was like
Oh,
this
that's good.
debate in class. It was this debate in class about like
Yeah.
what you need. And some said math, some said reading, class, right? Like, and so we're having that discussion. But one thing I did, like as soon as I could become a principal, I had a very hard conversation with my English language arts teachers about reading, right? And getting books in kids' hands that they want to read and taking away from a point system. I think there used to be a time where that was like, oh, we got to get these points to get kids and do the AR and pushing them to have so many points to read there. But then that doesn't get kids to just have a book to love to read. So part of me
Mhm.
went from having those points to read to having time for them to read. So in our study hall, the very first 10 minutes of study hall, every study hall they have is the kid has a book and they just got to read, right? Like I want you reading 10 minutes. So every day you're reading 10 minutes. So if you're reading 10 minutes every day, that's 50 minutes that I know that you're just reading for the enjoyment of reading. Like you get to pick your book, you get to have that shifting from everyone reading the same book to having themes and kids choosing what book on their theme that they want to like, that based off their interest, and getting books in kids' hands. And when we moved from having our books and literacy be part of points and instead going to being part of the enjoyment of selecting titles of things that interest them, kids were reading all the time. Like they had hands, and it really happened in my old school, the Centralia Junior High School, that man, it soared. Like I was so impressed that I'll be sitting at lunch and the kids bringing a book at lunch and I'm like, hey, put your book away. And they're like, wait, I just got to finish. I got to see what happens here at this
Ah,
time, right? And then even to the point where we painted our lockers different book titles Everyone got to choose their book title that they want. And so now we have in our library, like teachers get to put their spotlight book or what book they like. And so having that, so having it being part of everyday journal, right? Journey. I have a book with me, right? If I'm reading something, I'll talk to kids about a book, or if I'm reading something, I'll have it on my desk so when parents can come in and that leads into the conversation so they can see that I'm reading. And I have tons of books. If the kids in my office for being in trouble, as they're waiting, they need to calm down, I give them a book. Whether they flipping through the pages or whatnot, I give them a book, and this book about quotes. It could be a book about motivation. It could be a book of a kid overcoming challenges, but I give them a book and I'm like, here, read it, right? And then it shifts their focus, and they want to learn more, and they want to do that. So those are just kind of some things that I currently do to shift from literacy being about just getting a letter grade and being about part of your everyday life.
Yeah, and you know what? We forgot to mention what AR was. We just jumped out and said AR.
Right.
I think it's accelerated reader, right?
It is accelerated reader programs through Renaissance Learning. It's a good, like, in essence, it asks kids comprehension questions based off of what they're reading, right? So it's to make sure kids are reading and reading for understanding and getting there. And I think there's a place for that. But I think kids right now, right? Like kids can go listen to a book, they can go do all that good stuff. And I want kids doing more with literacy, right? So I don't want you just reading and comprehend it. I want you to read it and write an alternative ending. I want you to read it and you know what I mean? Like create a cast or see, right? Like create a music video off of it, right? Like I want them doing more with their literacy. So they're reading intentionally for a purpose and not just comprehension, but then that gets them more into, well, if they know they're going to have to create a scene from it, then they're looking at the details of the story. They're looking at the details of where it's at and not just, do I know what happened and why it happened?
Right. So it sounds like part of your reading success was because the village that you had around you, the encouragement, the messaging that you got, that education is important.
Yes, absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt.
And so you continued on, you finished high school, then what happened after that?
Yeah, I finished high school, and initially I applied to go to Eastern Illinois University right out of high school. My mom was working at the factory shutting down. I thought for sure I'd get money, but not knowing how to fill out FAFSA. My mom and my brothers and sisters didn't go to a university. We all went to a junior college. My brother and sister did. My sister went off to the Army, and I ended up getting nothing. So I ended up working and paying my way through junior college at Cascade State College. And honestly, it was probably the best thing. I got to develop myself more as a leader, as a student leader there. I got lots of opportunities to attend, I think, things that I would not have been to do if I went to a larger four-year university. I got my associates there, then went to Eastern Illinois University, finished up my bachelor's in elementary education with the middle school endorsement in math. Taught middle school math for 7 years. Before becoming an elementary principal in a first to third grade building in Centralia. I went back to the hometown that I was a student at, then became a teacher, then was an elementary principal for 1 year, went back to that same middle school that I went to and I taught at as a middle school principal for 4 years.
Dr. Young, how did that feel? Going back to see that you
I tell you what, it was great and a challenge at the same time, right? So I taught with and was a principal over teachers that were my teachers. So that was I tell you what, it was a hurdle, but it was also
can't get no respect.
Right, but it was also that hurdle of like, they supported me as their leader, right? Like as an educator, I created an environment in my classroom where students thrived, where students were very successful, was ended up being a teacher leader, right? Like, and do all those other things. And they did, they supported, they followed my vision and my direction behind that. And because I really believe creating an environment where kids want to be at, kids want to learn that, is best for kids. And so what we need to do is looking at our systems and our policies and procedures that prevent kids from wanting to be at school and create an environment that gets kids in that door. And then once you get them,
I'm going to ask you one of your secrets though. Tell me.
Right.
So one of my tell me the environment.
Right. So one of my secrets is I believe excitement is the fuel to education. Excitement is a fuel to learning, right? So one of my things is getting the kids excited to be at my school. Every year for back to school, I create a back to school video.
Yeah.
I take a current song and I rewrite it for my school that talks about our mission, our vision, really inspiring them with that. And so that's something that gets kids to see it, to understand who they are. And I'm hands-on. I'm in the classes, I'm tutoring kids, I'm actively engaged as the building principal, and I'm modeling to my teachers the next thing that I believe is not only excitement, but relationships, relevance, and results, right? So you got to build those positive relationships with their students, being relevant in your curriculum and your instruction to get the results that we desire.
Very good. And so it sounds like you're getting those results.
We are. We're moving. My current school I'm at, I came here now 5 years ago. And when I came here, they were marked by the state as underperforming due to subcategories not meeting on the state standard testing and not showing progress and growth. And after being here 2 years, we're commendable like every other school in our area. We moved up. Our kids are increasing in their learning. We're focusing on understanding our standards that we're teaching and really getting our students. Part of I think the challenge was our students just didn't believe that they could. There's this kind of mantra, I believe, that our students were those kids on the other side of the tracks, and that there was a ceiling to what they're able to do. And what I was doing was telling my students is, you are a student here in O'Fallon, Illinois. You are part of that same system that makes us a great community. You are kids who can be whatever you choose to be, and don't let anyone keep you from shining, right? Never settle for less than your best. And so getting them to believe that they can read at grade level, right? Like, so I told them the data, right? So my 8th grade class 3 years ago, I said, okay, right now, only 8% of you can read at the 8th grade level. And they were like, wait, what? I had an 8th grade. I called my family meeting. We had a family meeting, and I said, based off the state, only 8% of you can do 8th grade reading, right? English language arts standards. And they were like, no, that's not okay. But they knew the data. They knew what the state said. So this is what people say about you, right? So then when we tested again, 21% of them were on grade level, right?
Yeah.
That's huge. That's amazing, right? Like, you don't see those shifts and those jumps, but because they didn't care, right? It was meaningless to them. They didn't care. It didn't mean anything. They weren't taking pride in their work, and getting them to take pride in who they are and what they do in their own education is something that I really strive for them.
Yes. Okay. Now, don't be shy, Dr. Tron. You received a tremendous honor from the state. What was it?
So I was the 2020 Illinois Middle School Principal of the Year and our state's National Distinguished Principal nominee. It was awesome. It was a great honor because you don't do it for the accolades, but it is nice to know that, like, the systems that you create and what you do and the investment and the hearts, because this is a heart game. It's a mind game and it's a heart game. And the heart that you put into it, it's recognized. And it's something that, I believe if people will just sip the Kool-Aid a little bit, we can change the direction of our students' future. I really do. And so, and my teachers are sipping the Kool-Aid. They are doing what it takes and understanding that it's a journey, right? Like, learning and education, it's a journey, and we're only one part of their journey. But I believe the middle school time frame is one of the most important times, not in their learning, but also in literacy, right? Like, kids develop so many habits that they carry throughout their adulthood in middle school, right? Like, what it means to be on time, what it means to set goals, what it means to understand, like, friends and like, I do life lessons. Like, I tell them there's 3 types of friends: friends that pull you up, friends that pull you down, or friends that drag you along. We all have those 3 types of friends, but who do you put in your inner circle? Who do you let influence you? Who do you let, right? Like, and so really building that into who they are and what they do, trying to appreciate.
You're right. This is a critical time for them. And you're talking about those habits. See, now when you're having them do those 10 minutes, that's developing a habit, a routine that they will remember. Hopefully they'll continue.
That's the goal.
End it.
That is the goal. That is the goal.
Yeah, yeah. So now that you've been a principal there for how long did you say? Six
This is
years?
my 5th year. This is my 5th year here.
The fifth year. And I want to ask you about those books. Where are all these books coming from? Do you your school library? Is it you've got a lot of variety of books? Because the emphasis now is that kids need to see books with images of themselves. And I know that your school is diverse. Do you have a diverse collection of books for kids?
We do. And we're building it, to be very honest, right? So we did an inventory 3 years ago on our books, on books that weren't being checked out and this, that, and the other. And the books that like hadn't been checked out, we put them in our Roar store for kids to use their Tiger books to buy. Right. So they can take those home, get books at home, right? Like get books in your hand. Let's get you some books. Let's build your own personal library. Let that be something that you get. And it was great to see kids bringing stacks of books home that they wouldn't have ever checked out before because they were just sitting on our shelves, cluttered with everything else, right? But like, hey, here's some books that you can have using points that you earn by being respectful, responsible, and safe, right? So, but then we did. So I had sent my librarian a list of resources to go to look at award-winning diversified books, from whether culturally diverse, whether it is religion, whether it's looking at region, gender, identity, all that good stuff, trying to increase that. And so we're building that up. So every year, part of our library grant, my librarian takes part of that and makes sure that we're building out a diversified library. So
that's great. So if a student, you're encouraging them to read for 10 minutes, that takes away their excuse, well, there's nothing
absolutely.
I mean, well, you've got the science books, you've got aerospace,
we
you've got
an
autobiography of Elon Musk, you've got all kinds of things.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned something about the kids taking books home. Could you talk a little bit about the importance of the home environment to a child's literacy, like yours was, your parents and your village, your aunts encouraging you?
Yes.
What are you seeing among your kids today as far as their literacy environment at home?
Yeah. So what I realized with parents is I never met a parent who hoped their kids fail or who hoped their kid couldn't read. Oh, wow. What I have met is parents who don't know how to provide their kids with those resources or what that looks like, right? Because they base that off of their own experiences, right? So if I have parents who literacy was not important or education was not important, they don't want their kid to fail, but they also don't know how to emphasize what's important for those kids to be successful. And so part of that is trying to get parents to understand these are healthy habits and healthy things that could happen. So do I know that there are kids that, you know what, when they go home, they don't have to read and they can play video games all night long? And yes, I do, right? Like that's not necessarily important. And that's why I intentionally create an environment that allows kids to understand those habits that they need to set. And if they're not reinforced at home, then they know that these are things that here at school and things that you should be doing just to develop yourself personally. I do with my parent newsletters, I always send home, I try to include a healthy tip on things. So some of the literacy things I include is like on holidays, I always try to include them things they can do to reconnect with their kid with family time that's education based. So it's always like, okay, your holiday time, but why not go back and read a childhood favorite holiday story, right? And talk about that, right? Like go and do that, like intentionally spend some time, put our electronics down because we're so electronic heavy society. Put those down, right? If you're in a restaurant, ask your kids about what's on that menu, right? If they're younger kids, right? Like ask them things that they see on their menu and the words. If they're older kids, talk to them about things that you're reading, things that you're learning. All the signs that they see, like talk to your kids. If you're going on a road trip, talk to your kids about the signs and how you read the signs and distance, and because that's part of literacy, right? Like how you read your signs and how, right? So understanding that like the learning shouldn't just be within my four walls, that as a parent, I still want you to be a part of their learning journey and try to give them tools and tips to be able to do that.
Excellent, excellent. Well, before we wrap up, you're just going to have to tell me about what you're reading. Do you have a nightstand? And
Right. So I do. So right now it's focused on a lot of my own. So I have right now it's the learning principle, right? So I have and it's actually, and I probably won't show up on my thing, but I have the learning principle and it's on my desk, right? That I'm doing.
okay.
So that's my learning one. And then my personal one that I'm reading for my own enjoyment is Between Me and the World, Takashi. What's
Cope.
his? Yes, that's the one every so I put on my calendar every other day between 7 and 7:30 an alarm to read, right? So to read for
PM,
30
7 in the morning.
p.m. I do 7
Okay.
p.m. To read. And it's normally my kids' bath time. So as they're taking their bath, I do my reading, then we go upstairs. And our nighttime routine is I have two little boys, they get to pick a book. We read their book at night. Then we have a scripture book. They do their scripture book. We
Yeah.
say our prayers and we lay down. So trying to also instill that literacy in my kids. Like
Wait, what are their ages?
4 and 2.
Oh, yes. Perfect. Yes.
So,
They are watching you and mimicking you,
yes.
imitating what you're doing.
Yeah. So,
Oh.
yes.
That's wonderful. So you've got your professional book and then your personal book. And why do you think literacy is important? I mean, we've got millions of people around the world who can't read. Why is literacy important?
Because I feel like, so with me, literacy important. Literacy is kind of equal to the power, right? Like I feel like, if I bring it back to history and they try to keep the literacy from people because they know once you start reading and once you start learning, you want to learn and grow more. And you're not just going to be okay with the conditions as you're able to read more, find out more, your mind just craves for more, right? And so if you start having that hunger, that desire, you're no longer content with where you are and who you are. So part of that reading is giving your mind freedom to learn and to grow, giving your mind the opportunity to see the world, right? Like, don't take the picture that's given to you. You get to paint the picture that you read, right? And you get to build that mind muscle. And so I think that's what it is. And then that expands to so many other aspects of your learning, your growth, and your development. So for me, that's why I think it's so important to do.
Oh, wow. Well, that's wonderful. Well, I really want to thank you for joining me on this conversation about your literacy journey.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate your time. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching Literacy Journeys with Linda. You've just heard from Dr. Tron Young, a middle school principal in O'Fallon, Illinois. And if you like these interviews, please click that subscribe button so you won't miss any more Literacy Journeys with Linda interviews. Thank you so much, Dr. Tron.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. This was fun. All right.
Thank you.